Well, the mission of the Finance Department, of course, is to make sure that our county finances are in good order and provide financial facilities, procurement, mail, and fleet management services as internal service provider to the many departments of Clackamas County, to other agencies as requested or required, and to the Board of County Commissioners, and then also to county employees, so they can conduct the public's business in a financially responsible, transparent, and responsive manner. And in doing that, we keep to the county's core values as identified as spirit on the county's website: service, professionalism, integrity, respect, individual accountability, and trust. We try to apply those every day in the work that we do. The Finance Department is organized into 5 major lines of business, and that totals up to 17 programs underneath those lines of business. Are you seeing this on the screen?
Yep.
Great, good. Core administration is the office of the director. We have the procurement function, which does procurement and contract management, as well as providing courier services and mail handling services. Our fleet services group has fleet management, is responsible for vehicle maintenance and repairs for the light fleet, which is under half-ton vehicles. It also operates the motor pool and has the permanent rental program in which vehicles are provided on a rental basis to departments that need them on a daily use basis, rather than periodically under a motor pool sort of arrangement. Our facilities management group is our largest group. They handle facilities maintenance, facilities construction projects, and the construction projects are of different sizes, so they will be the overseer often for mid-sized projects that are over somewhere between $1 and $5 million. They also offer facilities support, utility management, which all flows through the facilities management group. That is the billing for electricity, gas, water, et cetera, goes through them, and they apportion it out based on square footage and other allocators. They also do fire and safety training and drills to make sure that our buildings are up to code in terms of us being able to warn people if there is a fire or other emergency. And then they have the facilities operations group, which is, oversees the rest of the functions. In financial management, we have payroll services, the most important of all services, budget support, which is Diane and her crew, grants financial management, and financial accounting and reporting. And at this point, just to acknowledge all those different groups, I'd like to introduce the management staff of the County Finance Department, starting with Krista Bosserman-Wolf, Deputy Finance Director. She's been deputy now for a little over a year, was Assistant Finance Director for about 2 years prior to that, joined us as Audit Manager about 7 and a half years ago. So under the procurement function, we have George Marlton. George, would you like to stand up? Thank you very much. Under Fleet Services, John Stockham is the manager there. Actually, Krista is sitting in for John because John is out on leave, and he is going to retire effective June 30 and leave us at that point. Our facilities manager, Jeff Jorgensen, is not in the room today because he was in Houston, Texas for the birth of his granddaughter. But in his place is Corey Johnson. And Corey, thank you very much. And our financial management group is overseen by Krista. We also have a grants group, and our grants manager is Jeff Aldrich. And am I missing anyone? David Bodway is within the financial management group as well. I beg your pardon, David. David, thank you. Good. And for payroll, I forgot to mention back when I said payroll is most important, our payroll manager is Vicki Anderson. And we are so very happy to have all of these folks with us today.
I agree with your assessment regarding payroll.
Thank you very much. So we're going to look at some trends in terms of our actuals and our budget and our proposed requested budget. You can see that our actuals for the year for 2016-17, we had revenues totaling $19,182,000 and change. Our actual expenditures were $18,975,000, and that actually left us with some carryover funds, which we brought forward. Normally, we return those carryover funds to the general fund, basically, because a good portion of our support comes from the general fund. In the case of 16-17, it was 1.767 million. The next year, our budget, the 2017-2018 budget, in the year that we're currently about to finish, our projected revenues were 23,262,000 and change, and our expenditures were showing at 25,650,000, with a subsidy from the general fund of 2.388 million. Our projected budget for next year, our proposed budget, is again about 23 million, up slightly, $400,000, with pardon me, that's revenues, and with expenditures calculated at 26.3 million for the department. And that would mean a request of 2.642 million in general fund support, or about 10% of our overall budget. And part of the reason for that is our Office of the Director is actually not charged out via cost allocation. It is carried in-house and supported by the general fund. Proposed budget for next year, our resources, the vast majority of those, 2/3, are through cost allocation. That's cost recovery charged out to departments on a number of allocation bases. We have fund balance of 9% in our budget showing up. We have other revenues of about 9% as well. General fund support, as I said, is about 10%, and we have interfund transfers coming into us of about 5% of the overall budget. Our requirements are primarily personal services, and followed by materials and services at 39%. The rest is reserves and contingency, which set aside, capital costs about 8%, and cost allocation of our own paid to other support services of about 4% of our budget. The issue of changes in full-time equivalents has been a matter of some interest here, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about that. In the administration line of business, we have a projected increase in the next fiscal year of 0.2 FTE. That's just more time that's going to be in the office. In the procurement function, we have right now 13.5 FTE. That's a jump from prior years, and that's because we've been fleshing out our procurement function over the last couple of years since the arrival of our relatively new procurement director, George Marlton. So we don't expect any additional in the next year, though we have some vacancies presently that we will fill to get to that 13.5%, or 13.5 FTE. In fleet services, FTEs are looking flat for the next year. In facilities management, we're looking for three additional staff. We've been trying to staff up over the last number of years, and we're achieving that year by year. And there'll be about a 6.3% increase in staffing with 3 bodies added. And financial management looks like it's going to drop that 0.2 FTE, so we're going to even that out with the administrative component. Overall, the sum total for next year is a proposed addition of 3 people, and that's a 2.9% overall gain. So how do we divide the amounts that we spend for our operations? Well, 14% goes to financial management, 6% goes to administration, 9% to procurement, 21% goes to fleet services, and then at an even 50%, facilities management absorbs the balance. And that's because they're our largest group with about 40 employees, I believe, roughly 40. So we're going to look next at key performance measures and results. That is what you get for your money. We have, in most cases, just shown one performance measure for each function, but we have a couple of new ones that we've added in there to demonstrate some changes. Our first one under administration is that our bond rating is maintained or improved. There was a question earlier about what our bond rating was and how we got there. For the 16-17 fiscal period, our bond rating was AA1, and that was brought up to AAA in the 17-18 year in January or February, of 2018. to a AAA rating. We would like to aspire to a higher rating, but there is no higher rating, so we're going to sit on our laurels with that one. The procurement function, we have a new result that is a desire to have small contracts under $50,000 completed within 10 business days of being submitted by departments. We are a service agency and we do our best to meet the demand. Since our change over to a new system of procurement, we have been gradually and actually adding quite a number of additional contracts into our group of contract requests. So in the 16-17 year, we had 783 actual. Our projected performance for this fiscal year is going to be, 781, 783 this year, and then our target for next year is to have 900 contracts submitted and completed. In fleet services, our change is, our requested change or projected change is to get from the 16-17 actual percentage of vehicle preventive maintenance completed and returned to service in a single day to our 17-18 target of 60%. Our projected performance is better than that 16% for the current year, and we are hoping to elevate that to 80% in the coming year. And we have some changes within fleet services that we're going to discuss a little bit later, based on the departure of the retirement of the current manager down there. In facilities management, the ratio of preventive maintenance to unplanned work orders in 16-17, it was at about 50. Our target in the 17-18 year is 50%. Our projected performance is slightly below that, but we're still ambitious and looking to 80.2% in the subsequent year. And that will be aided by additional staff if we do get those. Another result is to reduce overall energy use per square foot, the intensity per square foot. We didn't have results in the 16-17 year because it was new then. Our target for the year now is just under 65%. In the next year, we're looking at, in the current year, our projected performance is 71.3, and in the next year, we're looking for 64.3, and I'm not quite sure if Jeff would be able to answer the question of that, and I may invite one of my folks up during the question and answer session if you have questions about that. On the efficiency basis, square feet maintained per maintenance technician. In 16-17, we are actually trying to drive that number down, but in fact, because of the amount of space that we work within, it's not driving down very quickly. 69,000, almost 70,000 in 16-17 fiscal year. Our target for this year was 50,200. Our projected performance is actually going to be higher than the 16-17 year at 73.3 thousand square feet. And we're looking in the future to having enough staffing to drive those numbers downward to 50,200 square feet, which is closer to I'm trying to think of the right word, the standard, I guess, for space, the kind of space that we manage. For financial management, we have several different ones related to different topics. Payroll, employees per pay period paid correctly and on time. Our 16-17 was actually 99%. Our target for this year was 99%. We don't want to be too assuming, so we say 96% is our projected performance for this fiscal year, and our target for next year, again, is 99%. Normally, those variations occur when we do not get advised by departments that someone has left, quit without warning, some other circumstances or conditions that may occur. For the budget function, budgets where expenditures don't exceed appropriations at the end of the fiscal year, our actual last year was 96%. Our target for this year is 100%. We do expect that we will meet that projected performance of 100% without errors and going beyond the projected level. And of course, our target is always for this one 100%. We have a new result we're introducing this year, and that for next year, And that is financial reports filed on or before the due date. You see that that's NA for the 3 years coming up through this one. Our hope is to hit 95% conformance with that standard. And our percentage of vendor payments issued via ACH, that is automated clearinghouse payments. In prior year, it was 5%. Our target for this year is 10%. We expect that we'll hit that. We'd love to have that number zoom upward to 25%. We believe it's a more efficient way of getting payments made. So what have we learned or what have we changed? The administration is now tracking and reporting on the work done by our 2 business analysts. Our 2 business analysts are working on both providing training for PeopleSoft and also providing access to the help desk tickets and resolution of those help desk tickets for problems with software issues. That group is also working on our process and procedural review, so that when we do go forward to new software, we will be using only the current, most up-to-date standards for our processes within finance. Fleet has added 2 programs, and that's to help us better understand the long-term viability of that group and the operations. Motor pool and permanent rental are under review, and we're considering a shared resource model in the next year after the retirement of the current fleet manager. And we're taking a whole look at re-examining our business operations within the fleet function. We expect that we can make some improvements and save some money and right-size the difference between revenues and expenditures within that group. And Krista, do you want to make any additional comment regarding that?
We'll wait for questions.
Okay, great. Facilities has shifted resources between contracting and then in-house staff to better address some of our county needs. We have added contractors for a number of our functions that we used to do in-house. We have reduced the number of controls, that is electronic controls and landscape maintenance contracts. We've added staffing to better address our building maintenance requirements, and we're contracting out low-risk work, such as relaying cubicle space. We have a high demand for cubicle space change-arounds from our departments, and that has resulted in us spending a lot of time with staff who are not specifically trained for that function. We find out it's a better deal if we hire those folks, contract that work out, have them come in. They're much more expert at taking apart cubicle layouts and putting them back together in a reasonable way. So we're hoping that will give us some more access to maintenance work with our staff and have them do that, which is really their area of expertise and function. Next, our emerging issues. We have a lot of emerging issues within the finance function. One is that we are undertaking to achieve some major projects in the next few years. One is our OSU Extension Service Building Project over on the corner of Warner Milne Road and Beaver Creek Road. Also the courthouse project, which we have spent the last couple of years working with the AOC, and we've started our workings with Oregon City and discussing what we can do there. That's going to entail moving 2 clinics from their present site to a different locus of operations. We have new buildings and leases that are increasing the square footage of buildings that need to be maintained, and that necessitates the request for the addition of technicians. We have large capital projects that often require bonding, and that requires significant staff time to not only obtain the bonds and make sure that the bond process is carried out properly, but also manage bond compliance and bond reporting, bond payments, our interaction with the Treasurer's Office that makes payments on debt service. We have increased demands by departments that are going to increase our transactional volume, and we are going to need better software for that, both contract management software, asset management software, and then in the future, we're looking at financial software that will take us into the next portion of the 21st century. We have 20-year-old PeopleSoft financial software that's likely going to need replacement within the next 3 years. We've been talking about this for about the last 2.5 years with technology services. Some of our other fellow departments that provide related services such as HR, and we are fairly certain that the PeopleSoft system, which is not going to be supported after a number of years by its owner, which is Oracle, is going to be losing its vigor and will not be maintained or added to in the next few years. So we have strong reasons to believe that it's going to be in our interest to be looking at new financial software. We also have multiple capital demands that are lining up. They've been mentioned by various groups and by County Administrator Don Krupp. In addition to the courthouse, there are suggested projects that include expansion of the Family Justice Center, moving technology services out of its present location and over to the Silver Oak Building, and projected need for the new jail, as mentioned by Don. There are many, many things in our future that we are trying to plan for and also trying to plan for funding sources for all of those. So with that, I am going to ask for questions, and we can answer any questions that you may have based on your review of the materials that you've seen.
Thank you. Commissioner Hubbardson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a few questions.
Okay.
Since the AAA rating is as high as you can get, there apparently is no place else to go but down. Is that why you're retiring?
That's a very incisive and pointed question. That's not why I am retiring. However, both my wife and I are planning to retire at approximately the same time.
Just couldn't resist.
I know.
I was just hoping we could go for quadruple A rate.
Yeah. There we go. Shoot for the moon, right? A couple of questions. One is, why is the Office of the Director not funded via cost allocation?
It's primarily by tradition, I would say. This is a county-wide function that we offer. We do different work for different segments of the county. The bond, for instance, bonding is resided within the Office of the Director. I think that that's probably a good place to do that. My time, and I'm 1/5 of the people within that group, but my time as finance director has been split in many different ways, and for me to try to ascribe my time to different functions and properly allocate that, I think would be very difficult for us to do. It would probably require something like what the lawyers do with their every 6 minutes registering how much time they've spent within an hour. We're called upon to do a lot of things and do a lot of things on short notice and differently. So, ultimately, we are a general fund supported department in many ways, and I think that it's been appropriate so far. That model could very well change after July 31st and may be likely to. So I think we're always ready for a reassessment of where we've been and where we're going. But
You've assigned you've got three new FTEs for facilities management. Do you know what they'll be assigned to?
I think they're going to be assigned to the building maintenance function. Our crews are self-funded for all practical purposes. We charge out 100% of the contracting work that we do to either the department that requests it, or if it's a general fund or a general kind of contracting arrangement, then we charge the general fund for that. But most of the work that's actually done as construction projects is done on a department-paid basis. That is, Health and Human Services needed a new dental clinic, and our group was over there performing the construction related to that, procuring materials and procuring equipment that goes in there. That's generally funded by the department that is asking us to do it. So we don't allocate out any percentage of those construction crew workers anymore. We're really allocating out only the stuff that's done on a general basis to keep the county moving forward and well-maintained.
So would they be working on any backlog of deferred maintenance, for instance?
Well, that's what our aim is.
That is what they would do?
Yes,
Okay, I was
exactly. Yes.
trying to get a little
Right.
clearer answer.
Yeah.
Good for that, quite frankly. With other facilities coming online in the not-too-distant future, getting the backlog taken care of is going to be helpful.
That's
So
true.
that leads to the thought that, would we want to start adding people prior to the construction of new facilities so they can get experienced and trained up and prepared for when the new buildings actually come online?
I would say that my answer to that is, we have been requesting additional staff for the last 4 fiscal years. I think members who have been on this budget committee for some time will remember that. We really would like to have more staff that we can put to work on our buildings. We recognize the status of deferred maintenance on some of our buildings, and we've also had new buildings come online or buildings that we are starting to spend more time with.
And they're worth.
Exactly. I would say that our attempt has been made over the last multiple years to increase the staffing that are going directly at that target of deferred maintenance. So yes, the deferred maintenance and then getting ready for new maintenance challenges. That's why we've been asking for more staff.
And then I'm assuming that all the contracting out that you do, I think there's 20 projects you're contracting out on and the 19 projects that are going to be done in-house.
Smaller projects, right?
Yeah, the outside contracting is prevailing wage, correct?
It depends on in general they are because they're over the limit, the base limit for the cost where the prevailing wage is triggered, yes. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And, excuse me, Mr. Feely.
Thank you. Just sticking with facilities for right now, as I recall, you're in the process of doing a facilities asset management plan. Is that
We have been looking for facilities, for asset management software.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we have been doing that. It took about a year and a half to get to the point where all of our fellow departments that were originally on board with that decided that they did not want to incur the cost of that software. So we have to go back out for another RFP in order to establish a more manageable cost.
So maybe I overstated your progress.
Well, we actually had made what we thought was pretty deep progress.
Well,
but,
I thought I'd heard that, yeah.
at a certain point, we lost our partners in that quest. They decided that what they had was going to work for them, or they decided that what we were looking for wasn't exactly going to fit their needs. So we are going to resubmit the RFP in the near future. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that update. And how long do you think that would take to implement and complete, roughly?
Would you like to take a shot at that? Should we?
You won't be here,
Corey,
I know,
would you like to
but
come up and talk to us about this? Corey has been managing the asset management
Okay.
outreach.
I remember from last year, yeah.
Good afternoon. With regards to that, the goal of the objective would be ideally to have solicitation results of those solicitations and review with a decision made like in November with the thought of hopefully a 6 to 8 month implementation process. Ideally, the goal would be the beginning of next fiscal year to have that new program up and functioning.
The fiscal year following the one that
Yeah,
we're
no,
getting the budget for.
Yeah. This is the time of year where you're blending fiscal years.
Yes,
so
yes, the
I remember it well.
1920 fiscal year.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Then on ERP planning, I want to know generally how confident you are, like what's your percentage level of confidence in that estimate? And knowing that you know cases and I know cases where it's ended up being much more expensive than originally projected.
Well, one of the things we've been doing simultaneously to examining our processes in order to make them more efficient and more pointed and more modern, is we've been talking to some consultants about what it might cost for us to acquire and implement new software. The costs are basically spread across a range, okay? So on the low end would be, and I want to make sure I'm reading this, on the low end for the purchase and implementation, the low end of the cost would be about $3.4 million. On the, oh, pardon me, that's just finance, okay? The
Oh,
financial
okay, I was going to say that
Yeah.
extremely low.
On the high end, with the implementation consultants, probably closer to 10 million, 9.3 million, okay? If we include the HR group with which is our aim, because we
Right,
have
I would
things that
advise
go
that, yeah.
side by side and do also connect to one another. Our low end is projected to be 5 million for the cost and implementation, and on the high end, about 13 million.
And that's on top of the 10?
Pardon me?
Oh, okay, you're.
Oh, that's the
the total, okay.
the total,
All
right.
right.
Our 5-year cost is estimated to be about, on the low end, about $5 million for just ongoing maintenance, and 12.5 million for the high end of that
Okay.
range, okay?
All right, that's just something I would advise you all to watch. Make sure you've learned from the mistakes of others, because there are
Right.
plenty of mistakes, some of them not too
Yeah,
far
our
away
last
from here.
implementation being 20 years ago, you know, we felt like we walked away from that deal pretty
Yeah,
healthily.
yeah.
We saw some of our fellow governments experience runaway costs in the implementation and then
Mm-hmm.
failures of the software, rebooting the system, a number of things that really ended up being bad project outcomes. And so
Exactly,
we
very
absolutely
expensive,
want to avoid any of
time-consuming.
that. I
Okay.
think we've got the team oriented in the right
Yeah.
direction, and I
Good.
think they're looking forward to this challenge.
And then just my final question, we're talking about disaster management this morning, and continuity of operations planning came up, and I just want to ask you, for the finance department, what's the status of your continuity of operations plan?
We have established continuity of operations plans for, I think, several of our work divisions. The overall one for the Office of the Director is probably a little bit softer. I'm still getting to the finish line with that one, but the payroll division, you know, the AP office, procurement functions, I think they've pretty much got their ducks in a row so
Okay,
far.
does the COOP call for any off-site ability to run payroll?
Yes, we have, we've identified, and the facilities function has identified off-site places where we can go that are likely to keep standing in case
Because that's
of,
one thing we've
depending
done.
on
If
the
you don't
type of
pay your
emergency.
employees, they're not going to come to work. Because, well, a lot of employees live from check to check. They'll
Right.
find something else.
Right.
So that's good.
No,
Thank you.
we've made, this planning has been going on for, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
in terms of our facilities, what we designate as emergency sites.
Right, okay, good.
Where generators are located, that sort of thing.
I know when it came out this morning, it kind of took me back and saying, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
That's about how long ago it was.
Commissioner Schrader and then Mr. Magdalene.
I wish you weren't retiring, Mark,
Oh,
but I
thank
know
you.
that you'll have a wonderful replacement. You guys do such a fine job. And most of my questions actually were answered about the facilities piece, energy maintenance, so on and so forth. But I was here when our facilities were spread all over the place. So do you have any idea of what we're saving now because we have consolidated? I mean, I guess that's kind of a interesting question. but
That is an
let-
interesting question.
Are we saving?
There are a lot of different things that have happened in the world of using our facilities since we have consolidated many of our functions. We have put the sheriff's office in its own self-contained
Right.
building off-site. We have brought up these two buildings, this one and the one next, and then the central utility plant building, which is putting us on a nice footing for the future. When we build the courthouse, when we build the extension service building, and any other future buildings, we're going to be connecting those buildings via the central utility plant in order to achieve much higher efficiency in energy use and utility use. In terms of having a single place where people are located, that saves people from having to drive 20 minutes from some other off-site location in order to have a meeting with county council or with the board of commissioners. So just having that kind of closeness, we are a lot more in contact with one another. People get up and walk to go see somebody in person, which is a much more valuable way of contact than sending an email and having an exchange of emails. So I feel like we have made forward strides in multiple areas in terms of the closeness of all the staff to one another and recognition of one another's jobs, what people do. Those are a little bit intangible. In terms of dollar value, I'm sure we could come up with an estimate,
Yeah,
but I can't do that off the
figured you
cuff.
couldn't off the top of your head, I knew. We still have some facilities in downtown Oregon City, though, is that correct?
We
Corrections
do,
mostly?
we do, and
Which
most
are?
of those are located in buildings that are quite elderly. The district attorney's office is in a remodeled building from 1908, I believe. We have folks in the Willamette building, which is right next to the transit center. That's the
Community Solutions?
Community Solutions, thank you. I
Solutions?
keep,
Yeah, that's
Community Solutions, Business and Community Services, we have a number of things that have the word community in them. Community Solutions is still down in the Willamette building. Our Community Corrections Office
Corrections
is
is down there still.
And there are a number of other smaller things, just spread around here and there. Those are mostly smaller operations, but the ones I mentioned are the larger ones that have the
Okay.
most staffing.
The other question I have is the fleet piece. Does that include the sheriff's vehicles?
Yes. Our fleet group has been managing and maintaining not managing, pardon me, but maintaining the sheriff's vehicles. The sheriff's office has an assigned deputy that has done the specking out of sheriff's vehicles and forwarding that to our fleet group, and they've done the ordering and outfitting for them. We expect that that's going to continue into the future. The sheriff's office is highly satisfied now with the
Okay.
service they're getting from the fleet maintenance repair group. And so we're looking forward to their support going forward with that
Okay.
function staying the same.
And then I've just got two more quick questions. When you talked about a new system of procurement, what essentially has changed with that?
Well, I think what we've done is we have, and I'm going to ask George Marlton to come up and speak a little bit about this. We have educated the departments in what, not only what proper procurement means, but the most efficient ways to get to it. And I think we've done a very good job. George has spent a lot of time with many departments, including some of the large departments like the Sheriff's Office and H3S, in order to bring about some modernized procurement functions and also contracting knowledge so that we're not as prone to having contracts that are not quite meeting all the requisite specifications. George, you want to?
Yeah,
Good afternoon, George Marlton. Excuse me. So we haven't actually changed our local contract review board rules at all. So
Okay.
we're operating under the same legal guidelines that we had from before. It's actually finding the new flexibility routes that we have within those guidelines. So for instance, we want to use procurement cards more often than writing a contract. So that speeds up, it's cheaper for vendors and it's cheaper for the county and the department. Also, automating some of the contract request processes, so everything's going electronic now, as opposed to paper being kind of shuffled all around, because quicker we can get something done, the better price it is for us. So stuff like that.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And last thing, PeopleSoft. Are we going to get a new version of PeopleSoft, or are we going to migrate to something bigger, better, and more efficient?
I'm going to let Krista address that question.
All right, Krista.
So we have been spending some time doing market research to see what is out there and what options are available to us. And I think it's unlikely that we would use a reboot or a newer version of PeopleSoft simply because Oracle is not interested in supporting or maintaining that out to the
Right.
future. That's not their current newest product. It's not what they're trying to sell to the market. They do have another product, if you will, that is a cloud-based product that might work for the county that we've done some market research around. And I believe they call it Oracle Cloud or Oracle Fusion. It's two different names it kind of runs by currently. So there's definitely products out there. That's just one of them. There's many others as well that could work for us, but I don't think that you would be seeing like a PeopleSoft 2.0.
Okay, good, because it's never struck me as all that, I'll be honest, the years I've been here, it's all that efficient. It's somewhat been clumsy, I think, in many ways.
I would agree.
Not
with
that I'm a
assessment.
tech expert, but I think it's a good move. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, and then, are you not? Okay. And then Ms. Caldwell.
I have a couple questions. One, thank you for your service for all the years, Mark. I can understand ERP being a catalyst to change in your lifestyle.
That's not actually the thing that's driving me to retirement, but
But on ACH payments, how do you accomplish just going from the 5% to the 25%? Is it our end that's slow, or is it the other end that's slow, the vendor itself?
I think that we're just getting to some new understandings with our treasurer's function and developing that relationship so that we can be a little more efficient as we request those payments and get them done. So it's more or less interdepartmental cooperation with the treasurer's function. The technology is advanced as well, so any other things you'd like to add?
We certainly have the ability to pay via ACH, and it's beneficial from our vendors because we can process and get something in the run on a Wednesday, and they get paid the money in their bank on a Friday. And so a lot of this is vendor education and outreach to let them know that ACH is an option for them here at Clackamas County, and that we're willing to do that. And so part of our initiative was over the next year in our department is to start getting that information out to vendors. And there are ways that procurement, for example, George Middleton and his team can do that, with letters and education. They go to trade shows, they can get that word spread, so we can get those vendors signed up for ACH payments.
Okay. The other question has to do with grant compliance and who reviews the compliance part of it? What are you having to do, and what percent of the grant is tied up in grant compliance as far as the actual cost?
I think we should invite up Jeff to come talk about that.
We'll invite Jeff Aldrich up to speak to you about this. I will say that the county has a relatively new grants manual that has been reviewed by the board and presented to the board. We have been operating for the last couple of years, educating departments that receive grant funding about the new prospects for grant funding and the way to be managed properly. So, Jeff, you ready to talk about this?
Good afternoon, Jeff Aldrich. So currently, through the grants, so all the reporting comes through my office. So our grant accountants file the reports, and then they look through the terms and conditions of the awards. Some of them are very generic, some get very specific. And so they review in detail those requirements to ensure that when they prepare the reports, that we're in compliance. They run PeopleSoft reports, confirm the data, and just within the data that they receive, make sure that it's in compliance with the terms and conditions.
You have any idea what it costs us to do that? Let me put it this way, are there grants that you wouldn't want to get because the compliance side is so difficult?
Absolutely. So, there are some grants right now with the county that for a couple $1,000s, it costs us way more than the couple $1,000s to ultimately administer those grants. And so it doesn't seem very worth the time and effort it goes into some of those grants.
So does somebody review the grants before we accept them now?
So part of what I am trying to do with an update of the grants manual is to get a look at some of those before they come in front of you guys and the board, to give you some guidance on as far as, or a recommendation on whether I would say accept it or maybe deny it due to the work involved with those.
Thank you. Mark, you've been here a few years, and you're looking at the budget, and you're looking at the capital expenditures, not on new construction, I'll put it that way, expansion of facilities. And what do you look at when you want to determine what you do? How would you finance it? Let's just put it that way.
Well, normally we examine all the alternatives for financing, whether it's going with a public-private partnership or issuing bonds from the county without asking the voters to approve them, or going out for general obligation funding. We have financed our C-800, for instance, with a request to the voters to approve that, and they did that for the first time in my career here. They approved general obligation bond that financed $59 million in C-800 improvements. So we really try to match the financing to the lifespan of the asset that we're trying to build or create. And we want to make sure that we're getting the best deal. That's one of the reasons we've been working hard in order to get our bond rating up. We may have a private placement sometime, but all of those are just choices that we have to make as we move forward, depending on the climate.
What are the available avenues for the courthouse?
I think that we've talked in many different ways about how the courthouse could be financed. We have some things that I think are susceptible to asking the public for general obligation bonds. We have some capacity within the county to issue bonds by the county that we are not required to go out, full faith and credit obligations that would not overly tax the county, the county's own resources to pay without receiving voter support. So it's going to be a mix, likely, of that. We have some projects ahead of us that could be better accomplished through a public-private partnership. For instance, once we have a courthouse up here, we're going to need to develop space for attorneys to be close by. This is not an area where we have high office building concentration up here on the hilltop, but it would be very convenient and to our advantage to help provide some of that. And the public-private partnership is probably ideal for that kind of.
And when you look at, for the courthouse, if you did a private placement of some kind, delaying, I'm going to make an assumption that interest rates are going to rise for a period of time.
I think that's probably indicated, yeah.
And if we, the longer we wait, are we just, I just think you're looking at a higher interest cost.
Well, part of our ability to get a courthouse is really tied to the state's functions and the state legislature. We have the opportunity, for the only time that I've ever heard of, to get a courthouse built with 50% of the courthouse being financed by an outside entity. It has all kinds of strings attached because we're dealing with the state, but they're positive strings in the sense that we have the possibility of having the legislature elect to fund 1/2 of Clackamas County's new courthouse, which is a building that we expect will last at least 50 years and more likely 100 years based on, our projections. So we also think that this will afford the city of Oregon City a chance to do something completely different with that area downtown. There are so many positives about it. And the county's portion of the cost of that, we believe we can raise through multiple approaches to financing. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Magdalene. We have Commissioner Humberston and then Mr. Feely.
Going back to ACH processing, does that save us money by using that process, or is it just more efficient for the vendors?
I would say it also does save the county some money. I would tend to think myself of the staff time internally in accounts payable of them stuffing all the envelopes and checks to send out or returning them back to the departments. We'd be bypassing that process. So the staff time, there'd be some savings.
I think the age of paper checks is going to be over in not too long from now.
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, would it be worthwhile, even if it was only on a temporary basis, to incentivize vendors to take advantage of that process and give them a couple of % reduction in their bill if they take advantage of that? That I've seen private enterprise do that on occasion, to incentivize people to use electronic payment systems.
Right.
Would that be something that would be to our advantage to try?
Well, we do take advantage of all discounts on vendor bills. We do that already. If there's an advantage to using electronic transmission of funds, we would definitely take advantage of that as well.
Just thought it might be to our advantage to offer that to the vendor to take advantage of that system.
George Marlton,
From what I heard was that it requires some outreach to the vendors to get them to do it, so.
George Marlton again. So that's actually primary and the key. That's a huge incentive to the vendors. Part of our job is to reduce barriers for vendors to work for us. We need more vendors than we have available to us right now, so reducing those barriers is key. So when you're a normal small business and you have to do your accounts receivable and you have to issue an invoice and then wait for a check to come in, that costs you time and money. It also costs us time and money for all that paper again to flow around and checks to be cut out. So the huge incentive for us is to go through a program this next year that we're actually going to incentivize by asking people and offering, please get signed up for ACH as much as possible. That's a huge incentive in your small business. And if you get, say, a $25,000 check for a construction project, if you have to wait 3 to 5 days for your bank to clear that, that's real-time money. So doing an ACH process, they get paid when the money's in their account, they have the money. So that's a huge incentive. Our vendors really are looking forward to this. So we're jumping on that as soon as we can in the new fiscal year.
Good. All right, thank you.
We've also expanded our procurement card program, which means faster payments to vendors and less paper on our end of bill paying. And so,
Mr. Feely?
Just a quick question on the courthouse. What does this proposed budget assume about the courthouse funding, if anything?
this proposed budget, actually, we're talking about the costs that we're going to incur over the next 12-month period after the beginning of July.
Okay.
But
So
the
if you're going to go
courthouse,
out to the voters in November, say, for a levy, when would that have to be included in the budget?
I'm going to leave that to Laurel.
Or
She's been
bond
doing
issuance.
some of the review of that process.
We actually are pretty late to go out, Laurel Bettman here, pretty late to go out in November. We're looking at going out in the spring of next year.
May of next year?
May.
Yeah, and the cost of that is, It's pretty de minimis in the budget, so what we have put aside, though, is about
When would
100.
you actually change the 18-19 budget to reflect that?
We have,
I don't think we will have to make significant changes to the
after it
18,
passes.
19
because
budget
it's
for
something
that.
that finance does anyway, whenever we do
Yeah,
a
you do it by
financing.
supplemental or
We have put away $150,000 for outreach
Yeah,
for the
I did see that.
next year.
All right.
You know, the primary cost elements for the courthouse project are ahead of us by about 2 years, really. We're going to be starting design services and plan, and groundbreaking is really at least 2 years out, so.
How long is the state money available for?
Well, it's, oh boy, now we're getting into some territory here. Should we be approved by the legislature, should we be approved for bonded assistance for our courthouse project by the legislature, the state would not issue bonds in order to support our project until the end of 2021, near the end of the fiscal year of 2021. So you see that this is a long arc process. And then for a subsequent request, which would, you know, follow in the 21 legislature, that would be replicated in 2023. So what we're seeing is, you know, we will get reimbursed in arrears by the state after they issue their bonds. That's the way their project
right.
reimbursement works.
Commissioner Fisher and then Commissioner Bernard.
Yeah, I just want to get just a little bit more of an update on the timing for the courthouse, simply because of the risk that we can't ever rely on what the legislature
Right.
is going to do. And so the timing of going out in May after, which would be at the end of the legislative session, is something that I'm very concerned about, simply because I was involved in securing the funding for Multnomah, so I know how risky those state dollars are. Can you comment on that? I'm just concerned about us not having a really strong plan in place, and I don't know if it's appropriate for this budget committee to say at all costs, we must have this courthouse, even if it means that we use general fund money to secure the bond, to bond it internally rather than go out for voters.
Well, we have submitted our request through the AOC to the legislature. It'll be included in the Chief Justice's budget for about $32 million. That's approximately 1/3 of our total request to the state. So we will match that with our own financing for that initial amount of $32 million, which is entirely doable by the county internally, but we can figure out the best way to have that financing come to pass. We have to get over that
First time,
hurdle.
The
of-
32 million
Yeah,
first.
we have to get over that hurdle with the legislature approving our request for $32 million that will come out of the DAS budget ultimately. So we are hitting all our marks in terms of timing and cooperation with AOC, with the Office of the Oregon Judicial Department. We have another time that we've scheduled in front of the Chief Justice in order to refresh their memories of our project. We have just gone down and gone through the task force hearing and vote on placing our project in the queue at the appropriate place. And so I think that we are moving along with all due speed. It's a slow process. It's a slow ship moving in one direction. And I believe that once the legislature says yes to our request for the initial third, that the request for the subsequent 2/3 will follow, so.
So is there a risk that we could lose the third if we don't have a plan for the 2/3 that's solid?
Well, I think we'll be getting our design services and that sort of thing in place, you know, in advance of any
I'm
request
talking
we
about
make
the
for the 2/3.
2/3 of the rest of the funding.
Right.
If the legislature thinks that we're depending on a vote to fund it, I'm concerned that they won't. They'll pull their funding. So I'm just wondering if it would be the wherewithal within this committee to give direction to, we will fund this courthouse. If the voters don't approve it, we will fund it internally. I'm just politically, I've got that
Yeah, I
concern.
understand. Yeah, that's a little bit different than my financial concerns, I think. Let me put it this way. I think that we are in the right place at the right time with the right request. I don't think that there's a high likelihood that barring another great recession, that the legislature would not follow through with the second 2/3, the second amount. Our ability to access the capital market is good. We have our best rating ever. I think we could do this either using voted tax funding for the general obligation side, or we could do it with our own credit. Now, that's still to be determined because we haven't asked that question of the voters. At least we haven't got the answer back yet. And we're early on going out there and asking those political questions if the voters will approve funding for a courthouse and related projects for that. And that's the best I can tell you
No, I
from a
think
financial
those are
standpoint.
good answers. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Bernard.
Well, the need is statewide. I mean, there's about every county has the need. I feel pretty comfortable the legislature is going to support it. The task force voted to move forward on it. Seemed to be a lot of excitement. I would say that if we had to put out $8 million a year to pay the funding, I don't know that we would give up providing the services we provide to do that. But I feel comfortable that the voters, with the work that we're doing, will support
Big recession.
the courthouse. I mean, the story's the good one. We've been, divorces, child care payments are held up years because they can't get a courtroom, can't get a judge. So I think there's a lot of potential. 1920 is the year that we'll know that.
Yeah.
And
I will add, if I could
means
interject this note.
2019, 2020,
yeah, 1920.
1920.
In the 18-19 budget, we're expecting to pay about $5.07 million in debt service from the general fund. That's the sum total of that. And by 2029, most of those debts that we presently have have been extinguished. Without the $57 million that we asked for the C-800 funding, we have $80,400,000 in debt outstanding. For an entity this size and with our credit rating as it is, that is not outlandish. I think we are in very, very good shape. And because of that, and because of our rating, if we can actually tell the voters that our costs will be as minimal as possible in terms of interest rates, I think we're going to have a very strong chance of achieving that goal. So,
Is that it?
you had a question, though. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, I
you.
didn't really have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. And Commissioner Savas, and then I want to remind all of us that we have 2 more presentations from our finance director.
Yes.
And we have an additional hour left on our timing.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
I just want to put this in perspective. I know we have the borrowing power. It's just a matter, do we have the ability to service the debt? So Dawn, looking at Dawn, that to fund that debt service to build a courthouse is $8 million?
That's
Depends on
a
the form.
good figure to guesstimate at this particular point in time.
So absent going to the vote, going to the voters, absent that, I mean, the question really is, where do we scratch up $8 million annually?
So the only way that we would be able to scratch that up is probably to cut other programs and services. There is probably some capacity in the general fund in the future to be able to pick up some of that, but certainly not all of that. And even at that, that commitment then would not allow us then to meet other service delivery needs that the general fund supports in the county with a growing population. So.
Yeah, my last thoughts on that, I mean, the legislature's thinking that it's a detriment to go to the voters and that we have $8 million of debt service just lingering around untapped. I think that's a mighty, to me, that's a stretch that the legislature would think we would have that many dollars on hand waiting to find a home or a purpose. So I don't know of any government that's really doing that well at the county level in the state.